Anthropic reported the Department of Commerce has lifted export controls on Claude Fable 5 and Mythos 5. Some routine tasks, like coding and debugging, will fall back to Opus 4.8. For some routine tasks, like driving, it will fall back to being a Honda Civic. We are here. If you're tuning in, thanks for watching Agents Hour. We're going to do the news. We do this every week. If you want to stay informed, you want to see what's going on in the AI space, people that are building agents like us, like you all probably, if you're watching, you're interested in this. We try to go through it pretty quickly. So we try to make it, relatively fast to keep up to date if you're not wanting to pay attention to everything happening on X or whatever, social media news platform you subscribe to these days. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about Anthropic. We do this every week. We talk about Anthropic, it seems, and there's a lot to talk about. First, last week, June 30th, Anthropic, from the official Claude AI account, introduced Claude Sonnet 5, the most agentic sonnet yet. It makes plans, uses tools like browsers, terminals, and runs autonomously at a high level that just a few months ago required larger and more expensive models, aka Opus.
Yep.
So that's how they positioned it, is that this Sonnet 5 is essentially supposed to be as good as Opus, and it's cheaper, right? Of course, Sonnet's cheaper than Opus.
But
then they showed some graphs, and this is someone on X, I don't know, Angel, says, why are they even showing these graphs? Opus 4.8 is literally cheaper and better than Sonnet 5. So if you do look closely at the graph, Sonnet Extra High is better than some of the lower Opus in pass rate, but the cost per task is higher. So there is no place where you would actually want to use Sonnet if you're comparing this. At least, and this is, of course, this benchmarks agentic search, but they also have agentic computer use, and they're really, unless you needed low intelligence, you could maybe, get by. But for the most part, you'd never use any of the higher reasoning sonnets. You'd always just use Opus. So anything besides basic tasks, you would want to use Opus for if you need that high level of intelligence. Again, this is only 2 of the benchmarks. These are cherry-picked. Not all the benchmarks are exactly this way. Do your own research. Look it up.
But for agentic coding, the SWE benchmark, Sonnet 5 is still lower than Opus by a couple percentage points. But as we've learned, comparing to open models, those percentage points are a big deal.
Yeah. And so I think the way that I would put it is Sonnet 5 is interesting, but it isn't better. And I don't know that there's any reason why, if you need high intelligence, you would ever use it over Opus, which I think is kind of what they tried to sell, is that it replaces Opus for many tasks. I think the challenge is it's not actually cheaper. It typically needs more tokens, so it can still complete the task, but it uses more tokens. And yes, those tokens are cheaper than Opus, but even in those cases, oftentimes you're not actually saving a significant amount of money. So I think for maybe basic tasks, maybe, your chatbot doesn't need Opus, so maybe Sonnets makes sense for those types of applications where a lower level intelligence is good and a reasonable pass rate on tasks is good, basic tool calling, basic chatbots. But I think for any kind of high level of intelligence, you're probably going to end up just going for Opus anyways.
I think I only use Sonnet 5 when I'm in the Claude app and I'm doing some non-work related things.
Yeah, I'll probably use Sonnet 5 to manage my email, It's I don't need super high intelligence. I was using Sonnet before, right? So I haven't upgraded it yet. I haven't really fully tested it, but I'll upgrade for my email agent, and I'll probably use Sonnet for that. Honestly, I should be using GLM.
I think Anthropic, my ask for y'all is, when's the next haiku model? Because that's what I want. I don't need a Sonnet. I want a haiku. Something fast and cheap and good.
Also on June 30th, this is later in the day, Anthropic reported, we've received notice that the Department of Commerce has lifted export controls on Claude Fable 5 and Mythos 5. We'll begin restoring access tomorrow and we'll share an update soon. We're grateful to our users for their patience and to everyone who worked with us. And then later they said Claude Fable 5 will be available again globally tomorrow. But there's some caveats here. In the near term, some routine tasks like coding and debugging will fall back to Opus 4.8. Okay. And you can't use it for science or biology as well.
Yeah.
So the big caveats is that the thing that everyone would want to use Fable for, if you're listening to this, I'm assuming most of your usage of token usage is probably writing code or debugging code or analyzing code. So you can't even use it for that. And I believe this is still the case. I don't think I've seen anything that has changed this position yet. And
well, it's kind of hard for you to know because it falls back to Opus 4.8 transparently.
Yeah, I think there are ways to see. They made it so you could see when it is, but it's not that apparent that it does it.
Yeah, if you're like looking at the request details that come back.
Yeah, so I think they, especially through the API, I think they make it clear. But I don't know how the billing works. If they bill you for that, I'm assuming they would not bill you the Fable prices, but who knows? And look, I get it. They probably had to do this in order to get it opened back up. It's probably not their choice. I'm sure they want to release it as they designed, so their hands are probably a bit tied. But at some point, I would also argue, why even release it? What else are you using Fable for, if not for coding or science or some like deep research type tasks? And maybe there's other things like browser use or whatever that it could do better at. I don't know. But my usage is now, I have no reason to use it. I haven't even tried it since it came back.
I've been using it. So main reason for us using it here in the EU right now, June 30th was like an Opus lobotomy day. So I think if you're using Opus 4.8 here at least, everybody was complaining of just how terrible the performance was, both in like reasoning, API performance, etc. We were wondering what's happening with Opus. Then Fable relaunched shortly after us complaining. So there must have been like siphoning juice to the new model. We all started using Fable 5. A lot of the same parts of the model are true as before. It's good for planning. It's good for long loops, but you don't necessarily know unless you're like investigating the requests that if it does the coding task, is it actually using Opus or not? So I've been daily driving Fable since it came out. I see better reasoning for plans. I don't see better coding. So maybe that's just, the same Opus 4.8 that's been under the hood or whatever. I have also been too lazy to look. I have all the details, actually. I probably could have looked.
So I've heard that same thing of using Fable for planning and then using either GPT to write the code or Opus to write the code. So we got some comments. This one's from Mika. Fable 5 is pretty amazing for me, but so much guards. It auto-rotates to 4.8 a lot and charges you Fable 5 rates. You need to disable auto-routing. And Ruben says, having Fable money is the new flex. There's a lot of questions on subscriptions with Fable. Tariq has said it's going to come off subscriptions after July 7th, but they aim to restore Fable as a standard part of subscriptions as soon as capacity allows. The idea is, I guess, because of capacity reasons, they have to pull it off subscriptions and they eventually want to get it back, but they might not be able to. People are obviously using it a ton right now while it's available. So I don't know where that capacity just goes. Maybe they have other projects. Maybe they need to do training. Obviously that compute existed at this point in time, but I imagine they have other things they need that compute for, so they need to pull it off and make sure they can make money on those requests, I suppose.
I think Anthropic has burned so much developer trust thus far that, whether this is true or false, people are just unhappy.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is they burned the bridge so many times with miscommunication that it's hard to even know what's true. All right, so let's talk about routing. We mentioned this last week. Cognition released Fusion plus Fable 5, which they're calling Devin Fusion. It's a hybrid model harness. This is a trend we're going to continue to see. Walden here says they're excited to finally share sidekick and mid-session routing with the world. Our latest methods for multi-model routing. So 35% cost savings, still frontier level on day-to-day, works very well with Fable 5. Hopes it helps other agent builders out there. It's this whole idea around determining what models you can use, but also trying to still achieve frontier level performance. We talked about this, but a lot of people are using Fable as the planner and architect. So they're doing their own routing, right? If you're writing code and you're switching models between planning and implementation, you are the router. It's just not automated. You might decide, because you care a little bit about cost, and Fable, of course, can't write code apparently, or at least falls back often to Opus. You can use Fable as planning, and then maybe GPT-5 or another, maybe it's Opus, has the actual ability to write the code. And you could then use Fable as a judge. So, in Mastra code, we have goal loop where you can select which agent runs as the judge to determine if a task is complete. So maybe you still use Fable for that. So it changes pricing quite a bit.
We use Devin Fusion, or we tried to, and it's still not good.
Our usage of Devin has basically been, if you have a task where you could probably one-shot it, you can send it to Devin.
Yeah.
If you need a task where you have to have multiple steps, you're probably just better just to do that in your own coding agent. All right, let's talk about open source models, talk about Chinese models. ZCode was announced on July 1st. It's the official development environment for GLM 5.2. So it's available for GLM coding plan subscribers. Bring your own key is supported, available on Mac OS, Windows, and Linux.
GLM 5.2 is the truth, dude. So that's tight.
And I heard it looks and feels kind of like Codex, is what I've heard.
It does. It's almost like they ripped it off.
Yeah, they might have. They might have just like heavily borrowed some ideas from Codex. They're in China. They can do what they want, apparently.
Totally.
But GLM's good, right? I think we've been talking about this for a while. A lot of people are using at Mastra using GLM for large parts of their coding tasks. Maybe not everything, but
it's a great coding, like after planning, you want to execute. 5.2 is great. You can get off the Alibaba coding plan, $100 a month.
It's still slower though, right? Unless you run it on Fireworks or something.
It's pretty fast on Alibaba and it's kind of slow on Z, but I'm sure that'll change. And then Fireworks, it's chill. USA.
So this was last week. DeepSeek V4 is coming. It's been available, but it's apparently just been a preview of V4. They're going to apparently be making improvements to it. They're going to be changing pricing though as well. So it's going to get a little bit more expensive, but DeepSeek is getting close. We're in July, so it should be coming soon.
Yeah, we use DeepSeek a lot internally. Our favorite DeepSeek model is DeepSeek V4 Fast. You can use it for observational memory. It's pretty solid.
So just as you're saying, use it as an observer.
Mm-hmm.
Tencent released HY3, High 3. I don't know how they want you to pronounce that, but HY3 is here. 295 billion mixture of experts model, best in its size class, rivals trillion scale flagships, reliable and affordable. If you look at this, it is clearly behind Anthropic and Z in almost every benchmark, right? There's a few that it's competitive on, but for the most part, most of the major ones, it is behind, but it is very close to the other open models. I mean, it's right in there. Based on size, it's a pretty powerful model. Haven't tried it, but at least in terms of benchmarks, it seems to be competitive for that class.
Dude, did you subscribe?
Dude, I host the show. Did you subscribe?
Did you subscribe?
Subscribe to Agents Hour every Monday, noon Pacific. All right, we're going to talk about Inference and hardware. Apparently there's a company that had raised $800 million and has $1 billion in customer contracts, and I never even heard of them, which, it shouldn't be that surprising, but that's because they came out of stealth. So this was announced on June 30th. It's a company called Etched, and it says, we've built our first racks after a successful A0 tape out, $1 billion in customer contracts and $800 million raised. Early customer tests showing us achieving state-of-the-art throughput, latency, and power efficiency on inference workloads. Our first racks ship this summer.
Sick. Dude, put it in my backyard. Let's go.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing like a hardware renaissance, I think. It's like hardware school again. Cerebras announced last week, Gemma 431B is now available in public preview on Cerebras. Our first multimodal model runs at over 1,800 tokens a second for ultra-fast image and text workflows. So that's pretty cool.
Sick.
I want to test it for just like really quick image generation. I think that could be pretty cool. So that's fast. Let's talk about agent memory. This got shared to us. A couple of people were sharing it around. So this is from someone named Will. It says, I have a confession. I've been using a memory extension on my coding agent for actual engineering work for months without it telling anybody. And essentially goes on to talk about Pi observational memory, which was inspired a lot by our observational memory research. That's cool. You took what we had kind of built and you made it better or for different for Pi. So that's awesome. But the cool part is what it actually allowed you to do. So there was 77% relative gain on hard tasks. It basically fulfilled or succeeded on 5 times as many tasks as just Pi alone without, or the agent alone without adding the memory layer. So I think it just goes to show you that memory is important for coding agents. I mean, I think this is what makes Mastra code so great, in my opinion, is that I think our memory is just better. This is a version of observational memory, but similar results, using it in other frameworks. So it's just an idea of when you're building agents, I think memory is very important, especially with coding agents, but with all agents.
Yeah, I was wondering why you were so shy about it, though. You didn't want to tell anyone?
Well, but he didn't tag us. He should have just tagged us. Maybe he didn't want to, thought he might get some hate or something. No, it's open source. Learn from it, use it, make it better, contribute back if you can. But yeah, observational memory is good.
Yeah, I think it's like the 5th implementation we've seen. So that's cool.
And Tyler did say, Tyler's over here dropping some ideas how to make the scores even better. With observational memory, you have different windows, right? So if you have like message history and memory and you can kind of configure them, you can actually tune it yourself is what it comes down to. AIE was last week. There's a lot of different sessions on software factories. I saw a lot of talks around that you should still understand the code. When Dex was on the show a couple weeks ago, he was talking about how you need to understand the code as well. You can't just let things rip. I think there was this thought that maybe we wouldn't be reading PRs or even needing to understand the code. The agents would just do that. Maybe someday that will be true, but that day is not today.
I just think we've always believed this. But I think the industry has come full circle, because if you look a year ago, people were like, you don't need to read code, which maybe that's true. You don't need to read code, but how else do you understand code if you don't read it? I just don't understand that. But just a little anecdote here. We have having so much struggles right now in open source, getting hundreds of PRs a day from people who do not understand the code. And honestly, no offense to y'all, because you're trying to help us out by solving bugs and getting contributions and making the project grow. But I just think it's hard for y'all to contribute if you don't understand the code, if you just pass it to Codex. And funny enough, last week we got our first ever PR spam, where we got spammed by somebody opening PRs, like probably 15 in a row, boom, 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 just made by Codex with no issues, random ass fixes. And so we're struggling from the open source side, which is like, we need to review these. We need to make sure that the intent is correct, the behavior is correct, and it makes sense, like it's hard.
Somebody gave a Hermes agent or OpenClaw agent a Codex tool or something and just said, hey, go make this better. And it just shipped or tried to ship a bunch of random things. So let's talk about tokenmaxxing. That's what I thought was the most interesting about this, but it was a bit unhinged.
Palantir, a big enterprise company, they famously created FDE as a business model, which is forward deployed engineer. They also have this thing called an ontology, which is like a framework for how they build products for other people. The reason I tell you all that is Alex Karp, the CEO, he went on, I forget the channel, CNBC or whatever, and he pretty much went on a rant for like 18 minutes, and it's a really good, like, love him or hate him, it was a really good rant. It was about tokenmaxxing. It's about, just to boil it down, you should not be paying Anthropic or OpenAI money in excess for tokens, because that is, one, not good for your product. They are stealing your product via their observability, whatever. You should be using open models. You should be caring about token spend. You should be caring wisely about who you spend your tokens with. And you should, go for open models. This comes in line with when I think Palantir and NVIDIA now have a partnership together. They're going to be pushing more NVIDIA open models. So he pretty much went on the attack, despite being friends with these guys at OpenAI and stuff. He went on the attack that people should have their own governance on their own products, which I heavily agree with.
Yeah, it seemed like blasphemy 6 months ago, but I think there's a time now where I think people can start to resonate with it, especially as you've seen Anthropic shipping every, Claude design, all the things Claude Cowork, all the things that countless startups have been building, right? The joke is, your startup is just one model lab release away from irrelevance. So I think that the idea is like, maybe they're using all the queries that are coming in, seeing that Claude is good at these types of tasks and saying, oh, we can just make a product around that. Claude's pretty good at design. We could turn that into its own product. Claude's pretty good at, managing email. Let's make Cowork and give it a connector. And of course, maybe it's unrelated, but maybe they're learning from all the traces that you send them. So Palantir said, our thoughts on the importance of AI sovereignty. Your AI sovereignty dictates your institution's future. Sovereignty is the precondition for choice. Relinquishing sovereignty transfers the future choices of your institution to others. Data retention is your treasure. Transfer it at your own peril. I'm not going to read all of this. Tokenmaxxing hijacks your value orientation and decreases your institutional fortitude and intelligence. Yep. 4, controlling your weights is controlling your fate. 5, there is no contradiction between sovereignty and alpha. 6, politicizing the technical issues involving sovereignty is what your adversary wants. Yeah, I agree with that. Making it political is they don't want you to have choice, right? Ideally, the more political model releasing is, like as much as Anthropic didn't like Fable to get pulled, I'm sure some part of Dario was very happy because it now means that it's going to be harder to release really powerful models, and that means there's less competition. The question is always going to be, are open models going to be regulated in the US as well? So the fact of you might not be able to use open models, or you might have very strict limitations on which kind of open models you can actually use. Yeah. 7, real expertise is existential. 8, learn from institutions that are winning or that have consistently delivered. 9, only listen to institutions, countries, and people who have proven record of being right. I think one of the things that I thought was interesting was like Alex kept saying, those who are selling tokens don't charge based on value, they just base on tokens, which Again, you can't really charge based on value. So I don't fully buy into it, but I do believe that not all tokens produce value. Most tokens are not producing a significant value. So I would agree with that. I don't know how a model lab could actually charge based on value. I don't know how they'd do that. I guess Devin and Cognition have tried, right? To try to argue a method for proving that they have value.
True. But you have to spend X dollars, right? So it all comes back to spend. Dude, it's wild how like last year, no one gave a shit about token spend. And now we're having freaking AI sovereignty manifestos and all this. Like, world moves very quickly.
Primogen commented, Palantir making a based AI sovereignty tweet was not on my 2026 bingo card. Got a lot of retweets and shares from that comment. But I think it's important because I do believe that people want choice. The open models are getting good. Not everything needs to go through a frontier model. I think the frontier model companies do want you to put everything through. Of course, they're businesses. You need to decide like what's in your best interest. All right, let's talk about ecosystem and dev tools. This is kind of just a cool Mastra use case. I feel like we're very Mastra heavy today. This was Anakit created something called agentcn, which has a bunch of ready-to-use templates. Flu, Eve, Mastra, just one-click kind of installable production-ready agents. So that's cool. It's cool to see templates out in the wild. Anthropic is reportedly in early talks with Samsung to manufacture its own custom AI chip. So OpenAI did it with Jalapeno, and Anthropic's probably next. They're doing the same things, right, that you're probably doing. We're dependent on, if you're building agents on the frontier model labs and you want to maybe be less dependent. Anthropic and OpenAI are so heavily dependent on basically an NVIDIA, right? And so they want to become less dependent. So eventually you kind of move up the stack. You can run Supermemory locally. So that's cool if you want to run a memory engine locally. Vercel is helping Shopify rebuild Hydrogen from the ground up. So I only put this here because it's not really AI related, but if you are in the web dev ecosystem, you might have fond memories or maybe not fond memories of Remix. And I think this basically signals the end of whatever was left of Remix.
RIP.
And then this, which was funny. And I just put at the end because I don't think it's necessarily Dario's fault. Maybe his actions led up to this, but probably more the U.S. government. But it's if you're not watching, it's kind of a comic it's a picture of Dario with a Ferrari, and it says, for some routine tasks like driving, it will fall back to being a Honda Civic. And the joke around Fable falling back to Opus for actual coding, and that's what most people want to use it for. Last thing before we close out, new Anthropic research, a global workspace in language models. Of everything happening in your brain right now, only a tiny fraction is consciously accessible. Thoughts you can describe, hold in mind, and reason with. We found a strikingly similar divide inside Claude. So, there's this video, it kind of talks and it introduces a concept called the J space, which is and they kind of have a visualization of how it works somewhere in this video of like how the model kind of thinks subconsciously or in this J space. So it isn't doing active reasoning. It's also almost like subconscious reasoning. I don't fully understand it, but I think you'd learn a lot just watching this 5-minute video. I think Abhi, there's also like a research paper somewhere in here as well.
Yep.
So if you look in the thread, you can probably learn some things about how we understand some of these models to work underneath the hood.
I thought this was super cool to see because last week we are planning a feature very similar to this ourselves.
But not at the model layer, more at the application layer.
At the application layer, yeah.
But it's cool to see that models under the hood are kind of doing some of the same things to some level.
We're thinking about the problem the same way, but we don't have access to the model layer, so thinking of it more from the application layer. Pretty tight. The J space needs a different fucking name, though.
The J space is not.
I do not want this to be an industry term. Oh yeah, you guys implement the J space? Like we gotta nip that in the bud early, dude.
Agreed. All right, everyone. That is the show. As always, follow us on X. You can follow Mastra at Mastra on X. Subscribe on YouTube, Mastra-AI. You can follow me on X at smthomas3. Follow Abhi on X at Abhi. And we're here every week. We do the news. We bring on guests. If you know someone that we should be talking to, find me on X and DM me who we should bring on, who you'd like to see as a future guest. And we'll do some digging. We're looking to book out a little bit. And one final plug, we're going to be in London in a couple weeks. So if you're in London, you should come to the TSAI Comp. Otherwise, you can attend virtually. We might be changing the time we go live because we're all, most of the Mastra team is going to be in London. So we'll probably bring on some guests. We'll do a fun live stream. We'll have a whole bunch of the Mastra team on that stream, and it's going to be a great time.
I'm excited.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Agents Hour. We'll see you next time.
Peace.